This is Rise. Let's lock in with the goal of changing one life at a time. Yours. Together, let us rise up, inspire, strengthen, and elevate our minds. It's time to rise on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Saran Heron, and welcome to Rise. Today we're going to talk about the power of saying no. We're going to talk to Corey Poirier, who is a 5-time TEDx speaker, the founder of Blue Talks, a Wall Street Journal, USA Today Bestseller Author, a 2022 Success Magazine Emerging Entrepreneur. He's also the host of the popular Let's Do Influencing show, who has spoken on site at events at Harvard, Columbia, Oxford, Stanford, UCLA, Cambridge, UCLA, and Microsoft. A columnist with an entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, he has been featured in CBS, CTV, NBC, ABC, and is a Forbes Coaches Council member and is one of the few leaders featured 4 times on the popular Entrepreneur on Fire show. He's also interviewed 75,000 world top leaders. He has a new book, The Enlightened Passenger. He is here today to share the top lessons he has learned, habits he's discovered, and the secret behind the power of saying no. Learn helpful principles to help you practice saying no while understanding the importance of being able to do so. Corey, welcome to Rise here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you ever so much. I am super excited and stoked to be here.
I'm so happy that you could make it today. So those individuals who are not familiar with a TED speaker, you've done this 5 times. Share with us, what is that about?
So TED Talks, it's a platform where speakers get an opportunity to share what I consider a legacy message or a legacy talk. Right. So it's a branded, if we want to call it like a branded stage where
yes.
The letters behind you say T, E, D, and sometimes X, because there's a difference between TED and TEDx. TED is like the main conference that happens once a year. And then it's almost like franchises. They have licensees all over the world, basically. And so usually a TEDx event will bring together 10 to 12 speakers, always less than 18 minutes, sharing a message of basically what they call it a message or almost like an idea worth spreading. So a message that can spread and impact lives. And basically it's an opportunity as a speaker for you to get a talk out there that, like I say, becomes branded and carries a lot of prestige and weight to it. And to finish that all off, if I remember correctly, TED stands for Technology, Education, and Design, I believe is what it is. And it started with those letters, but then, and that acronym meaning that, but then pretty quickly, I think it just switched to TED. So most people I talk to don't know what it stands for, including people that run the events sometimes.
Nice.
But basically, like I said, it's a platform that shares ideas that could potentially change the world. And then viewers watch those ideas and talks either on YouTube, on the TEDx platform, on the main TED website, or live in person at the event.
Yeah, I've seen a few, which are very much inspirational. Now, as a columnist and those aspiring in your field, what advice could you offer for college students or just our listening audience who are interested in being a columnist, which you are?
I feel like it's a tough area because everybody writes differently. Some people struggle with writing, I'll call it freehand, like typing or with a pen and a paper, just writing and then editing. What I would say is, in my experience, the best way to write columns is to speak them. So talk them out. So in other words, record them, let's say on your phone or a device, and then it'll come across more natural. It'll feel more like a conversation with the reader. So I feel like for those that don't write often, that's the best approach. Me, I like the old school, like sit down and start typing and it comes to life. But I recommend for those that don't do a lot of writing that you can record it. And in fact, these days, you can even have the whole thing transcribed into an article for you.
You can actually speak and it writes for you. I'm going to get myself familiar with that application. Now, how do you come up with your subject matter and your topic? Like, how do you decide, what am I going to pick today to talk about?
So for me, this is, again, not all things work the same for everyone, because I know somebody, Lisa Nichols, actually, who I interviewed years ago as a writer. She's dyslexic, and she was telling me that when she wanted to start writing, She got offered a big advance and she put it in a separate bank account because she wasn't sure that she could write the traditional way. And she found out she couldn't. So what she did was she got somebody in to interview her, and that's what she transcribed into her New York Times bestselling book. And so I say this because not everybody's the same. I'm one of those people that, and I don't want to jinx myself, but I've never gotten writer's block. I never have a shortage of ideas. So I've been kind of fortunate that way. But to answer your bigger question there, usually it's from observation. Nice. So I observe stuff happening and I'm like, oh, that's a cool thing. Oh, that was pretty neat. And then I'm like, that would make for a good article. So I think for me, it's whether I'm writing a book or whether I'm writing a column, for me, it really starts with observing something and saying, oh, wow, that's a really cool concept. And then usually I relate it to something else that I already teach. So for example, and we can talk about this later, but if it was what I call the supernatural power of no, so, and we'll talk again, I think we'll explore that. But as far as that concept, it could be an example where I have somebody that asked me to do something and I really care about them a lot. And now I'm struggling because I feel bad saying no to them, but at the same time, I'm already juggling too much. So that would make for something to write or a column because I just had that experience. Then I can say, hey, I just had this experience and here's what I mean by the power of saying no. So hopefully that explains it. But that's usually what I do is I usually observe and then turn something that happens in my life into a column or an article or even a chapter in a book.
And you keep it more meaningful that you could actually expand on the topic if because it's your content and you could take it wherever you want to go. So I think that's real creative. Now let's talk about the power to say no, as many of us could relate, but somehow we tend to want to be people pleasers, right? And so we say yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is I won't say it's the biggest thing, but it's a big thing that is in my new book. So I have a new book called The Enlightened Passenger. Right. And one of the full chapters, and I'll call it lessons because there's 10 lessons in the book, is literally around the power of no. Since I wrote the book, I've been calling it the supernatural power of no, because it seems to be amazing what it can do when you really learn the power of this.
I agree.
But like I said, it's so important. Then the book's a fictional parable, so it's from a fictional perspective. But one of the lessons is about how I've interviewed thousands of thought leaders now, and I've noticed that they say no 20 to 50 times more than the average person. Wow. And so this is fascinating because, as you said, most of us want to say yes. I was taught growing up in a small town, say yes to everything.
Yes. And then never say no. And then you get stressed with everything.
Yeah. And if you're brought up that way, it's hard. Yes. You're conditioned to say no.
Yes.
Or say yes, rather, to everything and never say no. And so at the end of the day, what I figured is I had to figure out a way, if I want to join the high achievers that are saying no and actually having some sanity in their life because they're not trying to juggle so much, I had to figure out a system. So what I did was I crafted a personal mission statement. Mine is to be the guy that motivates, donates, educates, entertains, and inspires. And basically what I did by coming up with that is then I could decide easily how many of those does it cover off? Meaning if it's one of those, it's an easy no. If it's 0, it's an easy no. If it's 4 or 5 of those, it's an easy yes without regret. So that helped me figure out what a yes and a no was. The next part was I had to figure out how to say it without burning a bridge and pissing somebody off. And so what I did was I learned from this influencer, Shailene Johnson, that what she did at the time was she would tell people when they asked her, she'd say, I have to talk to my husband because we run the business as a family business. I have to make sure we don't have something else planned. Can I get back to you and confirm either way? If I can't do it, I'll help you find somebody who will. And if I can do it, then I'll help out. And she said that when she would get back to them in a couple of days, more often than not, they'd already figured it out themselves and it was already taken care of. But what's nice about it is it's hard to burn a bridge because most people can't really get mad at you when you say, I have to check with my family.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the how to say no without burning a bridge. And then the other part is for those of us that were yes people, what I suggest too is start small. So you probably get emails throughout the day that ask you if you want something. It could be spam. It could be like, hey, in my case, it's like, hey, do you want somebody to help manage your YouTube channel and stuff like that? Every day I get like 50 messages about stuff like that. And so maybe I start with that. Somebody I don't even know is trying to sell me something. Well, that's an easier no than saying to your best friend or your husband or wife, no, I can help you move.
True. Now, how could individuals see the mental health benefits in such a habit to practice? Because as you mentioned, you need to know what, we're going to talk about aligning is what we want to call it, right? If something doesn't align with your mission, then it should be an easy no versus not having a mission that you go by or a standard for those who want for a different word. Speak to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like ultimately, again, I think for me, the standard is, well, and I should add this is something I should have mentioned a second ago. But one thing I learned a while ago is that everything you say yes to is really a no to something else. And so ultimately, having that mission statement that aligns with what you believe, what you want to do. I mean, it could be as simple as I want to be let's say you're a realtor. It could be I want to be the most successful realtor that also serves and sells with integrity, let's say. So all of a sudden, it's pretty easy if you write a mission statement like that to figure out what essentially aligns with you, like what, and this is the best way I could describe it, what you're for and what you're against. So
exactly,
if you know your mission, you know what you stand against, but you also know what you stand for. And then it gets a lot easier to say no to the things that you kind of stand against and yes to the things that you are all in and for. And so that's kind of what I would say about the mission statement is figure out ultimately what you want to be remembered for, what you want your legacy to be, and how you want to serve the world. And then once you do that, when people ask you to do stuff, I think it's pretty apparent and easy to see if it aligns or not. For example, if you're one of your mission attributes like mine is to donate, so to give back, and then somebody wants you to be involved in an event where you know that what they're doing is unethical. Right. Well, that's not aligned with my mission.
Yeah, so that's a no.
That's a no.
That's a definite no.
Yeah. So hopefully that explains it. But that's kind of how I factored mine in. I will say Zig Ziglar, the late Zig Ziglar, had this great quote. He said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to become great." And so what I will say with your mission statement, you do have to write one to have a great one. So don't get too hung up on how it sounds the first time you write it. It might take you 3 minutes and it might be, I want to be the best mother in the county. It doesn't have to be grandiose. But what I find is the longer you serve and the more you lean into it, the more clear it'll become as to what it really is, and you'll fine tune it as time goes on.
It sounds like an excellent plan to me. You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking to Corey Poirier, a 5-time TEDx speaker, the founder of Blue Talks, a Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller author, a 2022 Success Magazine emerging entrepreneur. He's also the host of the popular Let's Do Influencing show, who has spoken on sites at events at Harvard, Columbia, Oxford, Stanford, UCLA, Cambridge, and Microsoft. A columnist with Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, he has been featured in CBS, CTV, NBC, ABC, and is a Forbes Coach Council member and is one of the few leaders featured 4 times on the popular Entrepreneur on Fire show. He has also interviewed over 75,000 world top leaders. His new book is The Enlightened Passenger. He is here today to talk to us how to discover and the secrets about saying no and learning principles to help you to be able to understand the importance of being able to do so. So, Corey, as we've been talking, you have an interesting concept which you call the vitamin P. Speak to us about that.
So vitamin P, the P in vitamin P stands for passion and purpose.
Yes.
And so what I often say is vitamin P is basically, first of all, I'll say passion is what you do and purpose is why you're doing it, in my opinion. So the passion side would be like podcasting, hosting a radio show,
right?
Knitting,
yes,
hitting a ball with a baseball bat, photography, stand-up comedy. You get the idea. Music.
Right.
So that's the what. The why you're doing it, in my opinion, is like to help people escape the crap of their day, to create a positive ripple in the world. And so my experience, you have to discover the what usually before the why. So in other words, you have to figure out what you like doing and do that for a while, and then the why eventually reveals itself. Having said that, where vitamin P comes in is I think the two of those are so powerful together, finding your passion and then living on purpose, that the combined of those to me is what vitamin P is. So it's like P to the power of 2, I guess, or root of 2. But basically I call it vitamin P, and it's the thing you can't buy in any store.
Absolutely,
but I always say it's one of the most important vitamins you'll ever take. But what it really means is that you figure out a way every day to live on purpose, and that is you taking vitamin P. And I do believe, which is a bold statement, it could be one of the things, if more people could find meaning in their life and purpose, it could be one of the things that could really help us tackle the current mental health crisis, which is a bold statement. but there's a lot to back that up. Like there's the blue zones, which is basically a study done around the oldest living or longest living and happiest living people. And the only thing that overlaps is that they have found meaning in their life. There's Dr. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where he said the only reason he survived the Holocaust is because he had meaning in his life. Like there's a lot to back up that finding meaning in your life could actually help you with mental health.
I have to totally agree that that's very important for each person who maybe you'll be listening now, that to find that purpose and live out that purpose. Now, for some people, they may never, I won't say never. Some people at this point in their life may not have the opportunity or have not yet discovered their passion and their purpose. Speak to our audience as you yourself essentially discovered your passion. So speak to us a little bit about that.
So how I discovered my first passion, because mine's evolved over time,
right.
But my first passion was stand-up comedy. And it wasn't intended to be, and I never wanted to be on a stage. I always say I got tricked into performing, but I had a stage play in a festival, and one of the actors sprained his ankle, so I had to write extra parts to give him more time to change his costumes. And nobody else knew the lines except for me, and everybody had their roles already full. So I had to write myself into a play I didn't want to be in. So at the end of the play, I asked one of the actors how he thought I could get over this fear. And he said, I don't know if this is the answer, but I'm going to a stand-up comedy workshop at the university. Do you want to go? And I said, sounds horrible. Sure, let's do it. And so I went, and ultimately, a few weeks later, we ended up at a comedy club. We didn't know we were going to be performing until 5 minutes before. I ended up getting up on the stage, bombing, as we call it in comedy, got no laughs, only to find out I didn't turn the mic on, so they couldn't even hear me. I mean, there's a whole story there. But what happened was the next day I went to work, and people at the office said, did you meet a girl or something? And I said, why is that? And they said, because you just have a different vibe or an aura about you.
Right.
And I realized at that moment that I didn't really fully understand it, but I realized something had changed with me going and doing comedy. And so I went back the next week and the next week and the next week. And it took me a long time to realize I had discovered a passion. And what happened was that evolved into speaking. And I mean, I won't keep you down the whole path, but it evolved into speaking and writing. And so my passions kept changing. Unfortunately for me, I never dropped any of the first ones off, so I was doing too many things. But my passion at one time was performing music in clubs, stand-up comedy in other clubs, and speaking for companies and clients. And so those all became separate passions, but it all started that one night on a stand-up comedy stage.
It's almost like it unfolds in different stages. Now, you're also an author. Talk to me why you picked the title of your book, which is Enlightened, right? Your new book that you have that's coming out or is already out. And why did you pick that title? And how, for those listeners who would love to get your book, how do you think it could help change their lives?
Yeah, so, I mean, great questions. The book itself, it's called The Enlightened Passenger. And basically, it's about two strangers on a plane. It's a fictional book. Two strangers on a plane, a young passenger named Robert in his 20s, who is successful in business, but spends more than he makes. Like, he just keeps spending, and he ends up paying for the next seat to him in first class because he wants to sit alone the whole flight. Right. Falls asleep, wakes up next to this smiling older man who tells him that he was bumped because the flight was full. He wants to go to sleep on him, meaning Robert wants to go sleep on the older passenger named Treb. But Treb is charming, and Robert figures out that Treb's made some money in his life, and he figures, I'm spending too much now. I need to figure out how to make more. I mean, that's when we're younger. We just think, not that I should save money or spend better, just I'm going to make more. Yes. So Robert figures, I'm going to learn how to make more from this old geezer, is what he thinks. He doesn't say those words, but that's what he thinks. Right. And then ultimately what happens is Treb teaches him not only how to become richer financially, but how to become a richer person in life. And so it's a book that is a fictionalized version of my life. So it's the older passenger Treb, when he talks about some of the things he's done in his life, it's stand-up comedy, music, that type of thing. It's stuff that I've done. The lady in the book that he's married to is really, in a lot of ways, loosely based on my wife. The younger Robert character is based on who I was when I was younger and in business. So like it's all based sort of on my life. And because of that, it's also based on my 7,500 interviews I've done over the years with thought leaders. So you get to learn the 10 lessons through the book that I wish that I could teach. Well, I can still, but what I wish I could teach my sons if I only had 24 hours to teach them. These are the 10 lessons that I would focus on out of all the things I've learned. So really, the argument for why to get the book is you're really learning what it took me thousands and thousands and thousands of hours to learn in real time. You're learning it in a book that's less than 100 pages because it's a small little pocket book. So I think it's the promise of what the book can teach you and share with you. And what the great part is, it's masked in a story, so you don't even feel like you're learning.
And it's in 100 pages. I think that's a quick read. We could get through that. Now, you believe we are all designed to live a certain way. Speak to me about that.
Well, I believe that, going back to our conversation about purpose and passion, I think that ultimately, I can't prove this, but I believe that people operate optimally and best when they have a purpose.
Yes.
And by the way, that purpose can be a good purpose or a purpose they don't even enjoy. But I think ultimately people need to feel like there's a reason they're here. And truly, how many people do we hear that are struggling say, why am I even here? What's the point of it all?
Yes.
And so I think when we figure out what the point of it all is and why we're here, it changes everything. And so that makes me believe we're all ultimately designed to live like that. It's just we're not given a manual when we get here to say, here's how you do it. And, I've seen
kind of figure it out.
Yeah, we have to kind of figure it out on our own.
Yes.
And almost like when they hand us a kid when we're become a parent, and then we're like, whoa, wait a minute. So what do I have to do? And I realized quickly, my wife always laughs that she said the best thing I ever said to her is when she said, what are we going to do? And she was really panicked. I said, I think we just have to keep it alive. He was like half a day old, so I didn't even say him. I just said we have to keep it alive, and we got 2 of them, and they're both still alive. So to me, we're successful.
Yes,
but
you're doing something right.
and they're happy too. But
yes.
But ultimately, we're not given a manual. But I do think we're meant to find that thing. And like I say, the sad part is, from what I've seen, if we're going to be realistic, it feels like a small percentage of people ever find it in their life, like less than 10%. I feel like we might be going in a better direction now, because years ago, like when my grandfather was out in the work world, there wasn't really a choice. It was just like, this is the job you can get, so you work at it whether you like it or not until you die. And now there's so many more opportunities, and we actually can do something we enjoy. But when I go back to the idea that I think we're designed to have a purpose, I feel like the proof of that is whenever people say, as soon as they retire, they're going to do all these things. And then they retire and they have no place to go anymore. Even that job, they hate it. They have no place to go. And what happens? We see a large percentage of people pass away within months of retiring. People that were like, that's all they could wait for.
Yes.
And they didn't even have an obvious health problem. And all of a sudden, they pass away. I really do believe that if you don't have some purpose, now you could find a hobby. You could start, I could start playing music in clubs again when I'm 65 or 70. I could volunteer. But if I don't find any of those things or community, I believe that it's almost like, what's the point of being here? I'm not even working anymore. I've already served that purpose. And so I do believe that's how powerful purpose is, that even if it's not a purpose we love, it still keeps us going if we have a thing to wake up for every day.
You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking to Corey Poirier, who is a 5-time TED speaker, founder of Blue Talks, a Wall Street Journal, USA Today Bestselling Author, a 2022 Success Magazine Emerging Entrepreneur. He's also the host of the popular Let's Do Influencing show, who has spoken on sites at events at Harvard, Columbia, Oxford, Stanford, UCLA, Cambridge, and Microsoft. A columnist with Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, he has been featured in and on CBS, CTV, NBC, ABC, is a Forbes Coach Council member, and is one of the few leaders featured 4 times on the popular Entrepreneur on Fire show. He has also interviewed over 75,000 of the world's top leaders. His new book is Enlightened Passenger. He is here today to share the top lessons he has learned, habits he discovered, the secrets behind the power of saying no, teach you helpful principles to help you practice saying no while understanding the importance of being able to do so. Now, Corey, as we're getting ready to kind of wrap up the show, I want to talk about a few more things. Now, for those who may be listening, who may be suffering any type of anxiety in terms of purpose, as we know, like you're suffering from something, it's sometimes getting in the way of you really being true to what you want to do. Talk to us as you could relate to that.
Yeah, for me, so in terms of how I kind of, I guess you could say, relate to it, is myself personally, I battled generalized anxiety for the better part of 4 years. And then about halfway through that, I started battling a thing called hypochondria. And so for those that don't know, hypochondria, in my layman's terms, way of explaining it is if I read about a disease and the symptoms, I would literally develop the symptoms and think I had the disease. And it's so weird how our mind works that, logically, you should be able to wrap your head around and say, well, I didn't have this yesterday. Now all of a sudden I have 65 symptoms. How did that happen in a day? Right. And then not only that, then whenever you go to the doctor, what you're looking for is the doctor to say, no, you don't have that. It's fascinating how then the next day you have 65 new symptoms of a new disease. But how you don't logically, and I'm speaking for myself, that you don't logically realize that's not rational. Like when you're in it, you're in it. And so I battled that for about 4 years. And I'm not a doctor. I can't speak for other people in this respect, but I can tell you what happened. And it's kind of a full circle moment to our earlier conversation. I started taking vitamin P. So basically, whenever I started finding my purpose and passion, it's going to sound a little crazy to say this, but after 4 years of battling and no end in sight, really, I went and started discovering meaning. And I started performing stand-up, as I mentioned, started speaking. And it felt like months. Within a couple of months, I didn't even realize, but the anxiety was gone. Wow. I've never, at least based on the definition of hypochondria, I haven't had it since. And that's 20-some years ago. And it all seemed to happen once I found a purpose.
Excellent. Now, for Corey, for those who are listening who want to get in contact with you, I want you to share your contact information and just leave one last key thing that you want to say about the power to say no.
So I think what I would say as far as getting in touch with me, I would send people to thisisthebook.com. Pretty easy. Thisisthebook.com. That's for the new book. And if you go there, it's honestly the best way to kind of get into the community. And I think it's easier because ultimately, if I give you five links, then you're likely going to struggle to go to one. That's the way we usually work, right? Yes. What do they say? A confused mind doesn't act. And so I don't want to give people a whole bunch. So I'll just say, if you go to thisisthebook.com, you can read a bit more about the book. I believe, our email address is on there if you want to reach out that way. Also, if you do decide to grab the book, there's a bunch of cool bonuses. And when you put in the order number to get your bonuses, then you're in our community as well. So it's really the best way to get into my loop. And at the same time, the book is $16.95 US. So it's a really inexpensive book. And like I said, it's a pocket book. So that's kind of how I would recommend. Obviously, the other route is just Google my name because it's a unique name. But I think it's often easier just to go to one place. So that'd be the website. And then, sorry, the second question, was it closing comments?
Yes, just a closing comment, and then we're going to wrap up our program.
Yeah, I think for me, a closing comment, I pick a different thing all the time whenever I'm asked something like that. So today I'll pick I always go by instinct. So what popped into my head today is in the book, I have a chapter called The Mayfly. And I learned about the Mayfly from an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond that was playing in the background. The older brother, Robert, mentioned something offhand about the Mayfly living a certain amount of time. Basically, the Mayfly lives 24 hours. The male mayfly, female's 3 to 5 minutes. So what I basically said in the book, and I would say to people here is, I'd ask yourself to write down how you would live if you only had 24 hours. So what would you do on that day? And then the follow-up to that is, why aren't you living that way now?
Thank you, Corey, for being here. It was a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm Dr. Saran Heron. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Rise, available wherever you listen to podcasts, and always right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.